Well, I realized this week that it's been a year since I came up and interviewed here, and it was nice and sunny like today, and everybody warned me over and over, it's not usually like this, don't get too used to this, we don't want you getting a false impression. I have gotten to experience, as one person called it, living under a giant gray cat. But I don't know if you remember when, back in reading the bio and all that stuff, that for 8 years I had a side project I did in Tucson. It was a little urban church that I did, and by little I mean like 20 people, 25 would be a huge service. It was really geared towards young adults and particularly artists. The majority of them were graffiti artists. I did have my regular gig, my regular call. But at the time, in that time with working with all these sort of 20 and 30-somethings, I got to get in on all sorts of very interesting conversations about how they felt about faith and life. And they would come to these nights, we called them art nights. We would just rent a storefront, and we'd throw out tables, and I'd bring in boxes of art supplies. And then I'd get Costco pizza, because that was the cheapest. And so we would get to, this is what we would do. Half of it was art, half of it was faith. Well, anyways, I would be sitting there sometimes in the back alley while the guys are spray painting their boards. Not walls, boards. We were not vandals, we were artists. And I'd be chatting, and I learned a lot about how they viewed church. And because I had been led to believe that the reason so many people weren't coming to church was because they didn't believe in religion at all, that God was fake and the Bible was just fairy tales and religion was about a magical sky daddy, you know, the whole usual atheist bingo card. You know, I got a bingo card, so when you talk to atheists, you've got sky daddy, imaginary fairy, opiate of the masses, crutch for the weak-minded, and sooner or later, you know, you'll hit one of those usual phrases. I was expecting that. I was all armed and ready for that. And that there was some of that, but honestly, most of the time, there wasn't a debate about whether God existed, about whether miracles were real, about whether dreams and visions could be signs from God. There was no debate about whether one could experience the divine in this world or whether God interacted with our world. Most of them believed in some of those things in some way, shape, or form. But the part that was always the biggest stumbling block was the organization part and the ritual. I remember one conversation really stuck out with me. This one young woman was looking at me, and she's like, well, when you have your services, do you all have to say the same thing? I'm like, say the same thing? What do you mean, say the same thing? Well, why does everyone have to do the same thing and say the same thing? And I'm like, they don't. Have you seen Mike, who sits over there? I haven't seen that guy sing in 5 years of being here. The joke went right over her head. And she's like, well, why do we have to say the same thing? I don't know if I believe what you're saying, or what if what I believe isn't what you're making me say? I'm like, well, then don't say it. I don't know. I don't have a bouncer. You know, there's nobody who runs up and goes, you didn't say it, we're taking you out. And it took me a while to click with what she was trying to articulate, was that somehow having a group where we all sang the same song and said the same words was a form of control and manipulation to get her to believe what we wanted to believe rather than her expressing it herself. And it was almost like it wasn't the God part, it was this idea that it was some sort of tool of conformity, that it was going to take away her individuality and cause her to live an inauthentic life. And if there's one sin in our modern world, it's being inauthentic to your true self. Right? That's how our whole culture is built. It used to be you just did a wedding and you followed the book. Now it's, my wedding must express my true self. And then you go to a wedding magazine and you discover that it's kind of mysteriously, everybody expresses their true self in certain consistent fads over time. That when barn weddings become a new thing, everyone expresses their true self in a barn instead of a church. I don't know. That's my cynical side, right? But church was feared not because of what it taught about God existing, but that it could in some way potentially rob me of my true self, make me what someone else wanted me to be. So I would try to gear things around that. I'd provide lots of opportunity for people to share their stories. We would sit and people could share testimonials. I had a young woman call me one time. She's like, Lars, I got to tell everyone this thing in my life. And she told me what it was, and I'm like, whoa, that's pretty big stuff. Are you sure you want to tell that story? Oh yeah, people need to know. I'm like, all right, it's your story. And so then I got done with my little sermon, and she told a story, and my sermon was like, pfft. It kind of faded into the background. And we would have time sometimes with art. We'd process traumas and hardships. There was always a lot of those. But then when it would come time for me to go and build up support in the regular churches, guess what they'd say? Doesn't feel like a real church. Why not? Guess what? We weren't all standing and saying the same thing. Try to please everyone, right? I've always been a little suspicious myself. My cynical side's a little bit suspicious of this whole find your true self thing, because I'm not sold that there is a true self, that there's some sort of real Lars inside the Lars you see, and that the goal is to find the authentic true Lars that's sort of genetically DNA baked into me and make my life match the inner part that's there. And part of why I don't really believe in that is because I don't believe that anyone is really an island. You know, we're born into families, and they teach us things, good and bad. And we're born in particular times and places and cultures, and they end up having an effect on who we are, you know, and what we do and how we see ourselves. And my true self would look a lot different depending on where I was born. If I grew up on some ranch in Wyoming, you know, I would have been good with horses and tractors. And what would have been my true self? My true self might have been roping. I don't know, maybe I'd still be good at it. I'll never know. I'm not starting now. I'm 53. But I wasn't. If I'd been born in the 1800s, maybe I would have gone off and learned whittling wood and made a good wagon wheel maker and discovered that my true authentic self is making wagon wheels. I have an uncle who can still do that. He's a brilliant carpenter. I think that is his true self. But I wasn't. I was born in Minnesota. I lived in small towns. I went to church, on and on and on. I am not an island. There are definitely things, I suppose, that aren't me, and that probably wouldn't be no matter where I grew up. I mean, our genetics does influence our personality, you know. But when people say they need to leave to where they're going to go find themselves, that's where I kind of go, okay, what do you mean by that? There's a certain amount that is very legitimate, I do think. Sometimes people grow up in very dysfunctional families or very sort of oppressive households and environment. They need to get away. They can't find acceptance there. I get that. And it happens that sometimes, you know, you grow up and you take on responsibilities and you follow a path in life, and you get to a certain point, you look around and you go, what am I doing? I've just been following someone else my whole life. I need to rethink things. There's truth to that. But usually when I hear somebody saying they're going to go off to find themselves, what do they do? If you watch pop culture, watch the movies, what do people do when they find themselves? I'm always like, well, let me guess. They leave behind their responsibilities, like their family and their work. They go traveling around the world. They spend lots of money. They sleep around and dabble in other religions. They use lots of mind-altering substances. In other words, they eat, pray, love. Remember that movie? I didn't watch it. I just heard about it. And I'm thinking, okay, so you're going to act like a college student on a gap year. And I've always wondered, how does that help you try and find your true self? I mean, how is that mojito on the beach in Cabo with the scuba instructor going to help you discern your life's purpose? How's that going to help you understand your gifts and your calling and how you can make a difference in the world? It feels like you're just going out and doing fun, indulgent things because you didn't get to. And again, sometimes there's a value in that. If your life was stifled, sometimes you do need to get away. But I just don't see a lot of finding higher purpose and self-reflection on the beach. To do that takes some community, some friends to bounce things off of. That would take some discernment, maybe some therapy and looking into yourself. And that might take, being a part of something and trying things, but then you're belonging, and then there might be expectations and rules, and now you're conforming and saying what everybody else is saying. Ugh, this is our world. And it's a very Western thing. I do think that's a very Western thing. If you look at most of the world, most of human history, how did you find your true self? You supported your family. You worshiped the family gods. You went into the family business. You married who the family chose for you. You wore the clothes your family told you were appropriate to wear. And you stayed close to home so you could support and take care of your family as they got older. That's your true self. Supporting your family. And your family decides what supporting your family looks like. So that's your true self. But we in the West, we got money. We can go exploring. We got choices. We have a lot of choices that the rest of the world doesn't. And all those choices can be overwhelming. And a lot of them aren't good for you. But that's what you get in a world where we as individuals have lots of choice over our lives. And it doesn't mean we don't pick it based on influences from family and culture and marketing and media and algorithms on social media. We have choices, but we're not islands. We all end up doing and believing things because somebody said so. But do we acknowledge that? This is kind of our mission field as a church, right? And it's not an easy one because you get to Jesus, and what is he doing? He's calling us to a kind of life that looks a lot like the opposite of the true, independent, self-actualized individual. It looks like discipline and expectations. I mean, we know that story of the disciples from Sunday school, right? I will make you fishers of men, fishers of men. We don't start, remember when you used to have Sunday school start with a piano? Down here we started it with a nice 1903 piano, right? I will make you, if you follow me. Anyways, nobody remembers that song. I remember that song. Jesus sees the guy, and he walks right up to him, and he says, the story is very, very short. He walks up to him, and he says, follow me, and I'll make you fish for people. Boom, that's it. They just do it. It says they dropped their nets, and they followed him. It's just a command. It's not an ask. It's not a sales pitch. It's not, hey, if you follow me, you'll get this, this, and if you act now. He just says, follow me. They don't know what's coming. They're not promised anything other than that they'll be able to fish for people. They just do it. Now, do I think Jesus knew them already? Absolutely. His hometown was small, maybe just a few hundred. I think everybody knew everybody. I think he knew who these guys were. I think there was some trust there already. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have just followed. But that's what Jesus does. He commands obedience. He tells us what to do. He gives directions. And people are free to ignore him. Plenty do. But his offer is direct and it's clear. Follow me and I will make you this. I will make you a fisher of people, an evangelist, a spreader of the gospel. And it feels so against our culture to talk about obedience this way. It's what we think cults do, right? The cult leader comes up and says, follow me. Doe, remember Doe? He came up and said, follow me. And a spaceship will come with the comet, and we'll get beamed up on a spaceship. So follow me. Wear these particular weird clothes and change your name to have Odie at the end. So we'd be Odie. Be John Odie and Ruth Odie and Lars Odie. And then wear these weird clothes and put on black Nikes for whatever reason. And then when you kill yourself, the spaceship will come. Because do says to do it. And that's what we think of. When somebody in religion commands obedience, our first thought is, this is a cult leader. And what do we think? I'm going to lose my individuality. I mean, Jesus comes along. I mean, he even tells people, follow me. You don't even, and one guy's like, can I bury my father? It's like, no, just follow me. You have to choose. That's really harsh. That sounds kind of cultish almost. The difference is this. The world tells us to find ourselves and be who we truly are. Jesus comes and tells us to follow him and be who God has made us to be. You see, we think of being a disciple of Jesus the wrong way if we think he's out to take away ourselves. He's doing the opposite. He's making us into what we are made to be. Jesus is the one through whom the whole universe was made. Remember that was a couple weeks ago? More like a month ago? Through him all things were made. And without him not one thing was made. That includes you and me. Jesus made us who we are. That means that Jesus knows who we are truly. Jesus knows all we could do and all we could be. Jesus knows even our limitations. Jesus knows you better than you know yourself. Following him is not giving up yourself, it's finding it. Jesus will not lead you on a path that is inauthentic to yourself. He will lead you on a path that is the fullest and the greatest you can follow. He will lead you on a path that will be the most impactful and the most meaningful. He will lead you on the most godly and holy path tailored to your gifts. You will find your true self by following Jesus because Jesus knows you better than you do. Discipleship is kind of a path of self-discovery, finding your gifts, your spiritual abilities, your talents, all the things you have that can make the most difference in the world. Following Jesus is not controlling, it's freeing. The world is trying to use you and sell you stuff, so they want you to think that you are finding yourself when you adopt what they tell you and purchase their products and wear them. By following Jesus, you follow someone who has nothing to sell, nothing to gain, but is commanding you to follow out of love and nothing more. Amen.